record it now. There are a number of questions that you might want or have, or you want to have a follow-up conversation afterwards. Donal has kindly offered to absolutely chat to you, so we'll offer any of your contact details that you have onto him afterwards. We are doing these every Tuesday, alternate weeks, so we do a webinar for 1 week on a topic of interest to social enterprise, and then we do a check-in the week afterwards. So if you want to come along any Tuesday, you can sign up on socent.ie/webinar or /check-ins. But we also do a number of other things, including the socent.ie/clinics, which are just an opportunity to chat if you want about any issues that you have for half an hour. We are offering these with the kind support of the Department of Rural and Community Development. We're also offering some local social enterprise networking chances as well, and we've had this one on the 30th of July. We're having the next one sometime at the start of September, and it's just a chance for local and regional groups to meet up. We've already got Mayo, Kerry, Cork hopefully will be starting up, and a few other places have expressed an interest to start up quite soon. So hopefully by the end of the summer, you'll start to see more and more places. If you're interested in joining one of those or setting up, please do get involved. And we also run the Social Enterprise Hour at #SoCentIRL. So if you are a Twitter person who's an expert or a total novice, please do log in to Twitter at every Wednesday at 9 o'clock for 1 hour. If you use the #SoCentIRL, you will be able to follow along in the conversation. So if you can search for that, and if you tweet that during that hour, we should be able to engage with you and hopefully maybe boost your social enterprise, get you into the skills of some marketing on Twitter. But honestly, it's more about a great support community that are available within our network here in the Irish Social Enterprise Network. We are also running the Buy Social initiative, which is at buysocial.ie. If you are a social enterprise on this call and you are not on the Buy Social directory, the question is why not? It is a free directory that offers you the opportunity to get found by selling your products and services. There will be more details on this in the next few while, but please do sign up. This is a great opportunity to showcase the best of all social enterprise in Ireland. With that, we are going to talk about the topic of today, the do's and don'ts of accessing social finance for your social enterprise. To that, if you'd please, if you've just logged on, please keep your microphone on mute. Any questions? I'm going to be asking this throughout. Please do use the chat feature. It has been quite useful for people to ask that. The reason for that is that when we ask people for questions and they all take their microphones off, it's a cacophony and we can't hear anybody. So if you could please have any questions, even during the presentation, ask them, that would be great. And we'll be recording the conversation today. So without further ado, we are going to welcome our social enterprise webinar speaker for the day. Donal, can you hear us? Are you able to speak?
Can indeed.
There you are. Good stuff. Excellent, Donal. Donal, you are the Associate Director of Community Finance Ireland. I notice that you've had a change of logo recently, actually. Congratulations. So sort of new times for Community Finance Ireland, am I right?
Yeah, certainly. It's only taken about 20 years, but we've eventually gotten an all-island brand name called Community Finance Ireland. As you know, we had the organisation was formerly known as UCIT, based up in Northern Ireland, where it still has its headquarters. But we've been making great moves here in the Republic for the last 12 years or so. So yeah, time came to make a change.
Great moves is an understatement. It's been a phenomenal rise of impact investing, and you're obviously hugely knowledgeable of all that. I could absolutely ask you about 50 different topics of finance and social enterprise, but I'm only going to ask you today about the topics that we said. We've got about 15 minutes or so. We're going to ask anybody who has any questions afterwards to maybe ask them in the chat box. So without further ado, I'm going to give you control of my screen. You're going to take us through the presentation, and if there is anybody who has any questions afterwards, can everybody see the screen? Yeah, I can't even see any chat now, which is all good.
All right,
excellent stuff. I'm just going to share the remote control. And Donal, you are in control. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this, and yeah, really looking forward to some of your pearls of wisdom over the past number of years.
Brilliant, Chris. Thanks a million for having me on. And to be honest, guys, so what I've got is about 15 minutes to go through a relatively straightforward list of do's and don'ts in terms of our experience of having organizations and social enterprises apply to us for social finance over the last 20 years or so now. What I'm going to do is stick a timer on this phone because I do not want to fall out with Chris when he has to kick me off about 15 minutes into it or so. All right. So as Chris rightly said, we just rebranded to Community Finance Ireland on an all-island basis there in the last month, and we've been releasing a few different brand assets and stuff like that. But to be quite honest, you know, the reason I'm here today is to talk about you guys accessing finance for your social enterprise from a general investor's perspective. So let's kind of ditch the whole Community Finance Ireland things. The sort of stuff that we're talking about here would be relevant for all financial institutions, to be honest, when you're trying to access credit from them. So we start off with the do's, and each one then we'll give you a little bit of an example of what I'm talking about. So the first one seems a bit contradictory in that, you know, what we're asking all social enterprise and community-based entities to do is to search the living daylights out of the market for grants and relevant grants without compromising your mission or your autonomy. Often people would say there's no such thing as free money. That is often the case. When you get a grant from a particular institution, they then determine what you can and cannot do with your business going forward. So you need to be very wary of that. We've also had an experience where sometimes an ask comes in for loan finance to us and it's a little bit too rich. It might be too much money involved for the risk involved. So what we would suggest those groups, we would point them in the direction of different philanthropic organizations. And one particular example recently where a group had, you know, that need to have some sort of other injection, you know, a 5-minute phone call got them €54,000 from a philanthropic group. So that's the sort of stuff that we would suggest people keep their eyes open for in the future. Vet your team from a skills perspective. So we're not sending them to an animal doctor or anything like that, but it's important that we understand that an awful lot of the groups that come to us are borrowing for the first time, and the people behind those organizations don't necessarily get involved with that group to borrow money at some point in the future. So it is quite possible that you would have a board at the minute with no financial acumen, even potentially no business acumen. And what we suggest is that now is probably the time to try and get those skills on board, because it's not ideal when you're searching around for them at the 11th hour when you're trying to access a loan. So that's something to think about. Make sure your spokesperson is reputable. So who you're putting out there in front of the group, who is actually going to be liaising with the finance agency on your behalf. And they need to be competent, and they need to have, you know, no skeletons in the closet themselves. I'm thinking of one particular organization that approached us for €300,000 some years ago. And, you know, I hadn't known them from Adam. I didn't know the guy I was speaking to from Adam. But when you do a quick Google search on him, the last places he appeared was in Stubbs Gazette for tax evasion. So that is not the sort of person that you want to be putting out there seeking to access finance on your behalf. So you know, make sure that you're putting the right person in front. Be wary of putting accountants, solicitors, consultants that are acting on a professional capacity on your behalf as the ones that will be seeking the loan finance. Remember, it's you and your group that, you know, us or any other financial institution will be lending to. It's you we want to deal with. So just bear that in mind. What I would say is respond to all communication from your potential investor promptly and with clarity. There's nothing as bad as a very long, drawn-out application process. And what it tells the investor is that these guys probably don't have their act together all that well. It's very, very, very much on a part-time volunteer basis, as opposed to being the main focus in the group's activities at the moment. So we'll raise flags. Ensure your governing documents indicate a clear and unambiguous power to borrow. So generally, if companies submit a big guarantee or that type of legal format comes in, co-ops, you know, that's understood. There's no problem. It's there in black and white. But when we're dealing with clubs and associations or organizations that aren't incorporated, it gets a little bit difficult, because again, when you set constitutions in place at the start, you don't think you're ever going to borrow money, and therefore the power to borrow doesn't come into it. The power to appoint and remove trustees is a kind of a connection there as well, and that generally we'll only lend to trustees on behalf of an organization, and that would be the norm. That's the way it should be done across all financial bodies. So that's something to look at. Again, it's not something you want to be dealing with at the last minute, so stick that in your diary and keep an eye out for it. Seek legal advice if borrowing on behalf of a social enterprise, absent the protection of limited liability. So unless you have a company limited guarantee and the directors have that limited liability, you're always encouraged to seek independent legal advice in terms of your responsibility taken on this debt. You're not normally asked to sign personal guarantees with social finance providers anyway, but still, it's if something goes wrong and there's negligence or fraud at the back of it all, you do need to understand that all bets could be off from a lender's perspective. and you just need to make sure that you're covering yourself with legal advice, independent legal advice. The next thing is that when you are going for looking for loan finance, to come to the table with some, as they refer to, skin in the game, some money of your own. Don't be looking at it. It'll come up actually as a country. Don't later on. Don't ever think that you're going to get all your money in the form of debt finance. We want to see credibility. We want to see community buy-in. We want to see maybe some sort of local level of demand from the marketplace itself at that early stage. Place a realistic value on the commercial worth of any assets in your ownership. And the issue here is that we would have a lot of accounts coming into us post the Celtic Tiger era in the recession, and we would have had assets valued at crazy money. And I mean, and even today, if you look at the assets that you're sitting on, it might be, for example, a GA pitch or a long-term lease from the county council or a religious community group or whatever. You know, you really need to be realistic in terms of how much money your value you're putting on that worth if it were to go on the market in a default scenario. Put your best foot forward if security is available. Now, there's a second part to that about grants being mandated. I'll come to that in a moment. What I'm suggesting here is that, you know, it's very rare that we would be dealing with organizations that have very good security. Let me stress that, okay? The vast majority of the lending that social finance providers would do is on an unsecured basis, okay? But we had one instance there a couple of years ago where there was an ask for €250,000. The ask was for property and buildings. And the security they were putting up, and when I look back and now, I'm sure they were having a laugh, but the security they put up was a Massey Ferguson 35 tractor, and they were throwing in a mower on the back of it for the grass. So you know, you need to be realistic and understand that for 250,000, Massey Ferguson won't cut it. In terms of the grants being mandated, what we're talking about here is that oftentimes social enterprises and community groups are looking for bridging finance to retrospectively claim different various state grants, be it sports capital or SAI or leader capital grants, etc. And what we would ask you as borrowers to do is to try and encourage that those grants would be mandated to the lender. So normally, for example, in leader funding, what they would do is that the leader agent or the funder would send the grant when it is being drawn down directly to the lender's account. And that would mean that it would automatically clear the loan that would be applicable to you. Why is that important? Well, there have been instances, and the public knowledge at this stage, whereby sometimes the grants will come back into a social enterprise's bank account, and they might think, well, look, there's another opportunity here, like a parcel of land that's up for sale, and land never comes up for sale here, and we've got this money sitting resting in our account. Why don't we use that? And then you get yourselves into all sorts of hot water down the line when you're supposed, well, actually you're supposed to repay that loan from the grant, and it's very difficult to kind of play catch up after that. So what we would say is get the grants mandated where possible. Get your financial statement certified by an accountant. And whereas, again, that would be the norm, a lot of companies limit a big guarantee. It's important when you go into clubs and associations that you're not just doing the stuff on the back of a Kellogg's cornflakes box or something like that. They need to be professional accounts. They don't need to be audited. But it's better for all concerned, including you guys as volunteers, that you have a professional, whatever it needs to be paid in terms of the few pounds, that you have a professional coming from outside certifying the accounts that you are putting in front of your committee, your board, your members at the AGM every year. And it helps as well that you should know exactly all those figures in those accounts before you sign off on it, because if we as a financial investor were to ask you some queries on those accounts and you can't come up with the answers, well, then the fact that you've signed off on them as that you understood and agree with them is a bit of an issue to have to deal with. Develop a 3-year plan, in particular when you're looking for term loan finance, supported by the income and expenditure projections and any underlying assumptions underneath those projections. But we would say that those figures should correspond with that which has gone before, and detailing how any investment will impact on the future. Again, projections is not something that an awful lot of community-based volunteers will have experience in doing, and we accept that. And what we would always say is, like, look at what your last couple of years' accounts have shown in terms of income and expenditure. What do you think they're going to be going forward? And then just put figures on that and give us the reason why they're going up or down, etc. And be smart in terms of fundraising strategies. So if you're telling an investor that you're going to borrow 50 or 60,000 and that you're going to have these different fundraising events over the next 3 to 4 years, well, outline exactly what they are, outline when they're going to take place, outline how much realistically is expected to be earned from them, and whether or not the people delivering them have experience of doing that. So just in terms of fundraising strategy, we can all say we're going to raise significant amounts of money in fundraising, but actually sit down and do it is a different matter. The last few do's here: speak with other social enterprises on their experience of accessing finance. In a lot of the social finance providers, there'll be loads of websites, or there'll be loads of case studies on the websites of past clients. And don't be afraid to pick up the phone and search those, and and even clients that got into difficulty. Yeah, you could have a lot to learn from them as well. Seek to develop a strong working relationship with your lender. I remember a wise lady once telling me, never step on the crocodile when you're crossing the river. So once you get the finance drawn into your account, that's not it. There's a long-term relationship possibly that you need to keep up, because things won't always work out. It won't be a bed of roses the whole way through the term of a loan. And we're here to help, as all other social finance providers are, to help you and your social enterprise through the tough times as well. But it's made a lot easier if you keep in regular communication and have that positive working relationship. Ask for the total amount of interest payable over the course of the loan. People can get confused by how much interest they're paying and how that is charged, etc. So don't be afraid to ask for, look at Donal, if whoever it is, if I'm looking for a 5-7 year loan of 50 grand or 100 grand or 200 grand, what is it going to cost me in interest if I don't make early repayments? Ensure that the interest is calculated on a reducing balance. I mean, that goes you should take that for granted in a lot of cases. A lot of credit union loans are like that as well. It's rare that it's not charged like that, but just to be sure that it is. Make sure you will not be penalized for repayments ahead of schedule, and that's something that a lot of groups want to be able to do, but if they get tied into a fixed rate product from some financial institution, they could find themselves being penalized and trying to clear the loan ahead of schedule. And then seek to access finance over the shortest period possible, without putting yourself under the cosh in terms of putting pressure on you to get repayments in. Then I think we're going on to the don'ts, and I'm looking here, I have about 5 minutes left to go, so Chris is quite comfortable there. Don't expect to get access to 100% debt finance. I've already touched on that. Always come to the table with some equity contribution towards the project cost, okay? Don't access term loan finance that is not calculated on simple interest basis. Now, to be fair, I have yet to come across any organization that has paid anything other than simple interest, and that's the interest that is calculated on reducing balance. But always make sure that that is the type of finance that you're accessing. Do not be led solely by headline interest rates. Okay, sometimes you might think that a cheaper interest rate is a better bet, but oftentimes that's followed by personal guarantees being required from voluntary members, arrangement fees, some other forms of penalty fees if not drawn down within a certain point of time, and maybe restriction on deposit that you might have with the institution, etc. So we won't be prescriptive and tell you what to do, but just don't be led solely by those headline interest rates. Look at all the terms and conditions. Make sure it works for you. Don't try to hide historic problems associated with the project. This is an extremely small island, very small island. Everybody knows everybody within about 2 degrees of separation, okay? If you do have problems, you are best putting them out there, warts and all, in front of a financial investor, and understanding and showing how you've dealt with them, explaining how they won't reoccur in the future, or what other structures you've put in place to mitigate the risk of that happening. Don't cease communicating with your investor subsequent to the drawdown of funds. I touched on that already. Always keep that strong working relationship with the lender at all times, because the chances are, once you start borrowing and you see the potential of it and how it has worked for you and how it has benefited the organization and the services, the chances are that you'll want to do it again. And the more than it's a small island, the social finance providers kind of work closely, a lot closer than you might expect, with each other too. So you don't want to be trying to dirty your bib with one and thinking then that it'll be okay with the other, etc. So you just need to bear that in mind. The other thing as well is that the central bank recently launched a central credit register, and this was something that probably wasn't an issue for community groups, social enterprise heretofore, but now pretty much every business loan over €500 is logged on the central credit register. So missed repayments and that sort of stuff, they will be available for viewing by all credit institutions now. Don't make assumptions about loan criteria without speaking directly to the lender. If I got €1 for every time that I heard, oh, we didn't think that you did bridging finance, or we thought that you only did bridging finance, that you don't do term loans, or we thought that you don't do over 20,000, or all this sort of stuff, for goodness sake, pick up the phone, drop us an email, log on to our website, or whatever institution it is that you're dealing with, ask them directly. Okay, don't be working on Chinese whispers. Don't expose yourself to personal liability. So we touched on the issue of trustees and volunteers borrowing on behalf of communities where they don't have a financial vested interest in. Okay, so you need to be very, very careful of that. Don't be signing personal guarantees unless this is, unless you've looked at every single angle, searched out every single opportunity. And this, if that is the last case scenario, well, then so be it. But generally speaking, that would be the last thing that you would want to do. There was an experience of where I came across an employee who had put her own, an employee of a social enterprise who had put her own house on the line for the social enterprise. She wasn't even from the local area. It was amazing. Don't be led into developing a project influenced primarily by the availability of grant support. Okay, so just because these guys are coming and saying, look, we've got grants available for X, Y, and Z, but you need to do it this way, unless there's a local market demand for it and there's a local community buy-in, steer clear of that sort of stuff. Remember, always go back to your own wish list, your own community audit, your own things that you need to do for your social enterprise locally. Don't be led by grants. Don't present accounts and figures that you're not fully familiar with. So I touched on that already. I don't need to dwell on that. Don't disregard the need to engage proactively with existing creditors on an ongoing basis. Burying your head in the sand like an ostrich for past creditors is not something that we would recommend, because ultimately loan finance comes in to sort all that stuff out. And it's a lot easier to sort that stuff out if you've had a good working relationship with existing creditors thus far. I think we could be on the last slide here, Chris. Now, don't borrow more money than is necessary, in particular for bridging capital grants. I mean, I'd like to develop on that, but time is running out. But in a lot of cases, what you will have is grants that can be recycled with small pockets of bridging finance, as opposed to having to borrow 100% of the actual grant amount. And that is a very, very important when you're going up to grants of 2, 3, and 400,000 euro. Don't commence the project development before it is fully funded. I'm only looking at a project at the minute, and they're about 25 grand short, and they had started it before they could confirm where that 25 grand was coming out of. It's not a good idea. It's putting you in a very severe position of disadvantage. Don't rely on verbal approval of grant support, financial commitments, letters of support, which is not something, it is not the same as a formal letter of offer. Letters of support, everybody wants to support you through letters of support, but they're not worth the paper they're written on. So remember, before you start a project, be serious, and that these sources of finance are in a legal form of some description. Don't base your capacity to repay on speculative grants. And I think either Chris cut me off or I know it's okay. Don't base your capacity to repay on speculative grants, first-time fundraisers, or subsequent asset sales. So if you're going to be able, if you want to repay on an ongoing basis over a term, you need to have some sort of a track record of earning income. That's what we're looking for. Fundraisers are grand. They're not ideal. Fundraisers are good for lump sum repayments of a term loan that is a kind of bonus territory. Speculative grants, certainly not. I've seen loads of organizations get into problems borrowing money on the basis that they think, or they are definitely going to, or they should get a particular grant, and it doesn't come to pass. That is me, Chris. If anybody wants to contact me and maybe you want to catch up on this, there's our details anyway on communityfinanceIreland.com, or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. But I'm here now to answer all the questions that need to be answered.
Good stuff. Thank you so much, Donal. I would never cut you off, as you well know. I would probably cut you off. Really appreciate it. And I know just so much. I think if for every sentence of that, you've probably got about 50 stories of why it's important. And so it's kind of difficult, I'd imagine, within 15, 20 minutes to talk about these things, but it's a really good overview. Bear in mind, everybody, you will get this. We are hopefully launching all of our webinars on YouTube at some point to show all of them. If there's any other questions in the meantime, you are more than happy to do that. I would encourage you now, if you do have any question, if you have a question that you think other people might also be interested in, please do use the chat feature. Appreciate Susanna, thanks very much for adding bits in. Always good to see new ventures. Ailish asked Donal, do they have a minimum requirement for how long a group must be in existence as a CLG? That's a really good question about longevity of accounts. It can't it must be dependent on how much money you should be able to receive, but it's a bit more complicated than that. Can you answer maybe that question for Ailish, Donal?
Good to see you, Eilish. Good to hear from her. No, there's no minimum requirement for how long a group must be in existence as a CLG. Certainly not. We do the vast majority of the stuff that the groups that we lend to, would be to established organizations, but we have, and we continue to do startups as well. They are that little bit riskier because the track record isn't there. Having said that, there are a lot of community groups and associations that move from a very established track record into incorporated as a CLG, and that's fine too. But let's talk about the ones now that just come out of nowhere and just turn into a CLG, and they're just a brand new trading enterprise. It'll come back then. That sort of a proposal will very much include what skin in the game they're bringing to the table. Okay, and that they have some sort of a commitment, and the people behind it, that they have a board that are of a diverse skill set and are competent and are willing to either give, get, or get off, as the phraseology goes. So that you're dealing with good people. So I hope that answers that question.
Good stuff. I appreciate it. I suppose part of the reason why we're doing these is the effect of COVID, and I hate to bring it up, but it's been such a devastating incident for most people over the course of the last couple of months. I suppose just a couple of things maybe I want to ask you. One of them is, like, what has the effect been? Clearly you guys have done an awful lot of work on your balance sheets as well, and you're trying to make sure that people's outstanding amounts that may have been affected through COVID, there's been an ongoing contact with them about how they're managing that. Can you maybe talk to first how people have managed with COVID? And, is there any general things that you've seen in the last 6 months that has affected finance, in particular loan books?
I was quite surprised, and I'm the only member of our organization that hasn't worked in the banking sector. So all the guys would have come through the 2008 fiasco and seen how that had impacted. I was pleasantly surprised at how resilient in our own situation our portfolio was in terms of the communities and their ability to keep up commitments. Now, having said that, the first thing that we did, Chris, was we contacted all of our clients directly to see, look, was there anything they needed from us? Because we understand that in virtually all cases, income had gone from X to zero overnight. We'd have loans out there from 30,000 up to $500,000. So, it corresponds then that the amount of money that monthly repayments would involve would be sizably different. Okay. But I would say in total, maybe about 25% of the portfolio looked for any form of forbearance at all. That was it. And the vast majority of those then were willing to continue to commit to interest only. And at this stage, I have to say, a very, very, very small number are actually now still in availing of a capital and interest moratorium, if you want to call it, which a lot of the mortgagees and in
right.
the
So people are back onto paying capital amounts then as well. They're not just paying interest only.
That's right, Chris. Yeah, that's right. Now, look at who knows what tomorrow and news will bring, and whether or not that we will revert to a similar situation. But it was pleasantly surprising how well they've done. But you asked about what have they done to kind of combat the impacts of COVID. I mean, if we look at the faith-based lending and the faith-based groups that we've invested in, they all went online almost immediately. Now, there would have been some that would have had a track history of delivering their services online, and their the spiritual guidance that goes along with that, and that to them became the mainstay of what they were doing. Obviously, then a lot of the clubs and associations that would have historically based their earning income or fundraising income on a weekly lotto moved that online, and a lot of clubs have seen significant increases above and beyond what they would have been getting on with the paper lottos through the smart lotto or club lotto or whatever sort of apps they use. Also then there was a move, and this was slightly, I suppose, in the very early days of it, groups and clubs were moving to, and communities were moving to get standing orders, like maybe €20 a month, basically looking forward to projects in the future, and the fact that a lot of them could access tax relief on those contributions if they were over €250 a year from each of those individuals. So we'll have clubs that we'll have invested in that will have been getting maybe 8 to 10, maybe 12 grand a year just from the taxman on relief from the contributions of the previous year from patrons. So all that stuff is virtual. Of course, you have all the virtual fundraisers too. We have people running half marathons and 5Ks and couch to 5Ks, everything around their own house and doing GoFundMe pages on Facebook and all that sort of stuff. So there's still an awful lot of fundraising being done. There's a lot of people that will still be working, fortunately enough, and they haven't had as much opportunity to spend money as they would have had heretofore. And so that those funds are being, part of those funds are being drifting towards charities and social enterprise and communities all over the country. So all in all, good news story.
That's incredible. I'm actually I'm kind of in awe of that idea of like new subscriptions being done as well, which is really good. I wanted to ask, I think Katie may as well just take over my asking of questions, because I was kind of going on this next piece, which is, for the 3-year projections, will you be looking for innovative fundraising going forward following the COVID-19 experience? And the second piece of that, how will learnings from COVID impact on your assessing of cash flow projections? Before you ask, I presume there's an awful lot of people that were stressed at the time, didn't have the detail, didn't know what to do next, didn't have 3-year cash projections, now understand the value of them. So I presume in the last 6 months, an awful lot of people who are boards and social enterprise managers, particularly, who are managing both up and down and had to deal with the crisis, particularly in social enterprises more than anyone else, have really come into the value of all of this. So I'm just wondering if you can ask to Katie Murray's question there, 3-year projections, will you be looking for innovative fundraising solutions going forward following the COVID-19 experience?
Well, here's the thing, all right? So a lot of the projects that we're lending to and investing in are going to be as relevant in 16 months, 16 years as they are and were 6 years ago. So if you think about the local community hall, if you think about the local GA club, if you think about the local evangelical church, these are things that have been around for a long time, and they run on fresh air, to be quite honest, in a lot of cases. They were run on volunteerism, and volunteerism will continue. And, we will get a vaccine, and this thing will go, and there will be a need for these organizations to continue providing the service and the camaraderie in the local community that they have been doing heretofore. So am I looking for innovative fundraising going forward? No, I'd have to say no. I would have to say no, because, to be honest, if this sector is to survive, is it to grow in the future, community gatherings are going to have to come back into play, and they will, and there's no point in thinking that they won't. Yeah, life at this moment in time, life looks like it's changed forever, the normal that we would have used, but that will change. We will get over this. And we were saying, what we would suggest, Katie, is that if a group were going to draw down 50 grand off me today, or whatever it is that they're going to draw down off our organization or any of, the first thing you'd be asked is, well, look, given the current circumstances, we know that you had an ability to repay back when we made the offer. But as of today, how are the repayments going to be sustained from, we'll say, the 10th of next month going forward? That's the question that's going to be asked at the point of drawdown. And if your circumstances have changed so much that, Donal, the answer is we actually won't have the money, well, then now is not the time to draw that finance. And we're prepared to wait with the groups until circumstances change to ensure that the monthly repayment is going to be, sustainable into the future. Okay.
It's an investment for you. You want to see succeed. And so if you have to just do a moratorium for 4 months, but it's going to survive for 40 years, that's in your interest too. You want to see.
That's right, and that's for the organizations that we have the loans already made to. I mean, those moratoriums are there, but we know, and some of them. Look at the reality is, some will fail, some will go, and that's just the way it's going to be.
And it's been unfortunate because an awful lot of people have opened up innovative barber shops, or they've opened up cafes and restaurants, and they've really tried to be sustainable when it comes to having a floor for people to walk in and engage with their services in a new way. People are offering all those types of things, and yet they would have been closed pretty quick. And so I'm just wondering, based on those types of things, which are great ideas and fantastic, but just got hit with a 1 in 100 years COVID flu pandemic. We always say that, like, an awful lot of social enterprises closed the front door and opened the back door because they were ending up doing an awful lot of Meals on Wheels and other services, and they lost their income, but they increased their expenses. You're involved in that, those stories. You've been listening to those. You're aware of those things. You want them to succeed because they help communities, and when communities bounce back, they're going to help pay back these loans as well. And so that's an interest. Is that?
Just the example that you gave, the prime one would be the Slieve Bay Hotel up in Knockatallon in County Monaghan. 14-bedroom facility up there, community owned, doing great stuff. Major earner Sunday lunches, major. The whole community comes together for Sunday lunches. That all stopped, but they pivoted, and it's crazy with Meals on Wheels now, you know. But they're being seen probably more so now out and about in the community than they were, and they were very prolific as it was. But you know, so when things go back to where we'd like to think that they will be, you know, their profile will be even higher, and people will respect the work and the way that they roll up their sleeves during the COVID. It's just one example, you know.
I'm going to, if anybody's got any last questions, I'm going to have to wrap up. Clearly there's people eating their lunch, and that's great. This is what we're all about. So we want to give them a few more minutes before they get back into the ruckus at 2 o'clock. So how, the final bit of Katie's question, how will learnings from COVID-19 impact on your assessment of cash flow projections? I presume that's covered in what you already said in do's and don'ts, but has there been any change on your emphasis on cash flow projections? Change is a bit strong. You probably
well, we've always put a lot of credence in cash flow projections, and more so than the projections themselves, because let's face it, paper never refuses ink. The underlying assumptions behind those projections. Sure. Now, if we were thinking, I'm thinking of GA County Board and stuff like that. You know, they might have an experience of bringing in maybe, say for example, €250,000 on gate receipts at matches in the previous year. You know, for the next 6-7 months, that's not realistic. If you put down that if you put down your average that you've taken in over the last 2 years and expect that that's going to cut the mustard going forward, well, I mean, that's blatant. But yet we've seen that, you know, and you have to ask the question then, lads, you understand where we're at now, you know, you're calling me from home, I'm calling you from home.
Yeah.
Do you not think that's strange for any particular reason? So yeah, you have to ask these questions, and they may seem like silly questions, but you know what? I've never thought of any question as being silly, and it's very important that you get an answer. Yeah.
Well, I suppose don't be afraid. If there's anybody else has got any final questions there, and bear in mind if we don't get around to everything, I realize that a lot of you want to contact Donal one-to-one. I presume there's an awful lot of questions that you have for Donal. I've always found you to be incredibly open, and you're always able to take calls, and you and your team have been fantastic about that, Donal. So I deeply appreciate that, and I expect that an awful lot of people will find that if they've never chatted to you before, they will get that sort of service. A couple of things. Your project at the moment, is there any new products or services? I know you did a rebrand recently, but is there anything changes that you've had recently? Is there anything to announce that maybe Community Finance Ireland are you know, doubling down on or competing with or making things happen? Is there anything? Now's your opportunity.
Yeah. No, look, at recently we've had the rebrand. That's been a major milestone for us this year. We also then are currently just closing in on the Social Finance Foundation's new fund of €44 million, which is going to bring us up to 2025. And the thing about that fund and how it differs from the 100 million fund that went over the previous 12 years is that it comprises an easy credit guarantee from the European Investment Fund, which basically means that 80% of any losses that are experienced on lending to social enterprises and community-based organizations will be covered by the lender, whatever conglomerate that it is. So that allows us then to be much more acceptable to risk going forward. So that's one of the things. We are looking at a couple. Sorry,
just on that then, that means that there's an opportunity for you to take on lower amount loans because they're generally seen as more risky. Is that right? Or is there any other?
Yeah, to be honest, the reason we didn't go into the really low loans, Chris, like
minimum at the moment.
Yeah, minimum at the moment is €30,000. It's 25 grand sterling, and that goes up then, as you say, to about €500,000 or the equivalent in sterling. So that's generally what we do. And the reason we didn't go down to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 euro loans is because we've never charged arrangement fees for our term loans ever. And you know, so it didn't really pay us to do the same level of due diligence and take the same level of risk for a 7 or 8,000 euro loan that we would do for a €500,000 loan. You know, so that was just a policy decision we made. It may change in the future. It's not on the cards right now. We feel that, you know, for groups that are looking for 5,000-6,000 euro, if you were to take a club, maybe a boxing club or something like that, looking for 5,000-6,000 €, really the ideal way of doing that is to go either into your local credit union. And I know the credit union may not deal with the entity as such, but they will deal with a number of individuals. And I mean, it is going down the personal liability route that I kind of suggested not. But to be honest, it's not generally something that you're going to access as a community group microfinance. No.
And you could bring it back. You could do a couple of quiz nights or something to make up that sort of money. It's not 30 grand, it's 5
Well,
grand.
that's just it, Chris. I mean, you're going to be burning off somebody, so you might as well be burning off your own local community anyways.
And it shows commitment and buy-in and all the rest of it. That's fantastic. That is excellent. I really appreciate it. There's an awful lot of thanks. People are looking for the presentation, and I think I've got private messages to say people are going to contact you privately. So hopefully after this, or in the next next week, or maybe just after the summer staycation thing has gone off, maybe people will start to contact you when they've got more relevant questions. I'd just like to say thank you so much to you, Donal. Deeply appreciate you being on. Our contact details are on our website, socent.ie, but also your contact details we'll make available. So for everybody, really appreciate. Thanks very much, Donal, for coming along. To all of you, thank you so much. Oh yeah, Donal, sorry.
Just one final thing is that there's a lot of the people there that might be listening that might not necessarily have a project ready to go right now. Don't be afraid to contact us and use us as a sounding board about approaching any other financial institution or any grant body, etc., because we're always keen to hear from different projects that are going on. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll ever have to borrow money off us, and you won't be shooting yourself in the foot by telling us all your problems, but it's good to, there's a benefit to us here and dealing with these groups at early stages, yeah.
I appreciate that. You've gone through the entire conversation. I didn't once say that you give out free checks or that you are just made of money, or I've done well.
Never hear a Cavan man saying that.
Never, I know, which makes it even funnier as well. So just if anybody, Donal does on occasion write out personal free checks, just anybody wants, just
Revenue commissioners get those.
Donal, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. I really appreciate it. You've been incredibly supportive of the social enterprise community, and also over the last number of years, and continue to do so. And we obviously appreciate that. So thank you so much. For anybody who's on the call, we'll be offering out these webinars on YouTube shortly. If you have any details you want to ask Donal in advance or from here, please do. We'll send out all of the details for the presentations as well if you're on the call. So for us for now, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. You can happily log off. I'm going to stay on. I presume Donal might stay on for another little bit, but that is the end of the call and the webinar. So I'm going to stop the recording, and thank you so much.